The city exhaled a weary breath, a symphony of distant sirens and the metallic clatter of late-night industry. I watched it from my window, a solitary sentinel in a world that had long since forgotten my name, or at least the name I once held with pride, UserRH. The syllables felt alien now, stripped of their former weight. My world had shrunk to the four walls of this cramped office, a mausoleum of forgotten cases and bitter memories. The dust motes dancing in the anemic glow of my desk lamp were my only constant companions, silent witnesses to a career that had imploded with the force of a supernova. A ghost I was, haunting the periphery of a life I could no longer claim. The past clung to me like a shroud woven from regret, each thread a whispered accusation. I saw her still, the girl from that last, damning case, her eyes wide, forever accusing, forever lost. It was a wound that festered, unhealing, a constant reminder of how easily trust could shatter, how quickly reputation could dissolve into ash. The shrill insistence of my desk phone ripped through the quiet, a jarring intrusion. I stared at it, a black monolith against the clutter, as if it held some malevolent intent. Few dared to call this number anymore. Those who did usually sought something illicit, something beneath the notice of the legitimate world. I let it ring, counting the pulses, a perverse exercise in control. On the fifth ring, a flicker of something, curiosity perhaps, or just the ingrained habit of a life spent answering the call made me reach out. UserRH, I answered, my voice a gravelly rasp, a stranger even to my own ears. A pause, then a familiar voice, strained and urgent, sliced through the line. It was an old colleague, someone I hadn't spoken to since the fallout, a man whose career I'd inadvertently scorched in my own fiery descent. UserRH, it's Thorne. Elias Thorne, the name hung in the air heavy with the weight of celebrity. The tech titan, the innovator, the darling of the city's elite. His face graced every magazine cover, his philanthropic endeavors lauded, his company a towering monument to modern ambition. What about him? I asked, a cold knot tightening in my gut. Thorne was untouchable, a gilded icon. He's dead, the colleague stated, each word a hammer blow. Found him less than an hour ago. Brutal, on his yacht. The image sprang unbidden to my mind, sleek vessels bobbing gently, their masts like skeletal fingers against the bruised canvas of the night sky, the air thick with the scent of salt and expensive wood. They need someone, outside, someone who sees things differently, someone who doesn't care about the politics. I scoffed, a dry, bitter sound. And you thought of me? The city's pariah, the one who couldn't even keep his own badge polished. The sarcasm was a shield, brittle but necessary. The truth was, a spark had ignited within me, a dangerous, forbidden flame. The scent of a true mystery, a puzzle demanding resolution, was an intoxicating poison. They won't know you're involved, not officially. I'll run interference, but I need your eyes, UserRH. This isn't random, it feels orchestrated. And frankly, the way things are going, I don't trust anyone else to look past the obvious. The ghost of the girl flickered again, a silent scream in my mind's eye. My jaw clenched. This wasn't about redemption, not yet. This was about a hunger I thought I'd starved, a compulsion to peel back the layers of deception until the raw, ugly truth lay exposed. Where is it? I asked, the words forced from my throat, a reluctant surrender. Dock 7, Slip B, you know the one, I'll meet you there. Try not to be seen. Just observe. My gaze drifted back to the cityscape, now a blur of lights through the smudged glass. Thorne dead. The ghost of the past still haunted me, but the present had just delivered a new phantom, one demanding my attention. I navigated the familiar streets on autopilot, my mind already dissecting angles, anticipating obstacles. Tonight, however, it hummed with a low, controlled chaos. Blue and red lights pulsed rhythmically, painting the sleek hulls of the yachts in a macabre disco. Uniformed officers, their faces grim, moved with a practiced efficiency that spoke of long nights spent wrestling with the aftermath of human cruelty. The air was crisp, carrying the metallic tang of sea spray and something else, something cloying and unsettling. My old colleague, a man whose face was etched with the weariness of too many unsolved cases, spotted me almost immediately, a silent nod passing between us. He gestured towards a particular yacht, a colossal vessel that dwarfed its neighbors, its name the Sovereign, an ironic flourish now. Not really, he murmured as I approached, his voice barely audible above the distant thrum of a generator. The crime scene unit is still doing their thing. They'll be at it all night. I didn't need to get near it. My eyes, honed by years of sifting through the detritus of tragedy, swept over the scene. The way the light from the patrol cars glinted off the water, reflecting the chaos. The subtle shift in the postures of the officers, a tightness around their shoulders, a rigidity that spoke of something particularly gruesome. My gaze settled on the Sovereign. It was a smudge, almost insignificant, yet it drew my attention like a magnet. Not a splash, not a spray, but a deliberate smear, almost as if something had been dragged. And then a glint. A small, almost imperceptible gleam, caught in the beam of a passing flashlight near the waterline just beneath the edge of the yacht. I didn't answer immediately. My eyes narrowed, focusing on that elusive glint. The air, already thick with the scent of diesel and the sea, now carried a faint, coppery undertone. Elias Thorne, the untouchable titan, had met a violent end here in this haven of luxury. And something about it already felt wrong, a discordant note in the city's mournful symphony. This was no simple robbery gone awry. This was a message, scrawled in blood across the water. And I, the disgraced, the pariah, was being asked to read it. The yacht marina after dark hummed with a low, electric thrum, a stark contrast to the quiet horror unfolding at its heart. Police lights, a restless kaleidoscope of red and blue, bled across the polished hulls, painting the scene in an unsettling dance. I stood on the periphery, a ghost in my own city, the familiar chill of a fresh kill settling deep in my bones. It was a language I knew intimately, one I'd tried to forget. The subtle shift in the officers' postures, a tightness around their shoulders, a rigidity that spoke volumes of the unseen violence. The detective, his face a roadmap of sleepless nights and grim cases, stopped before me. His eyes, weary pools beneath a furrowed brow, held a plea I knew well. "UserRH," he began, his voice a low rumble. "I knew I'd find you here, like a moth to the flame, eh?" A bitter taste coated my tongue, more like a scavenger to the carrion old friend. What fresh hell is this? My gaze flickered past him to the gleaming vessel at the center of the tableau. The sirens' call, I noted, a gaudy name for a floating coffin. Thorne, the detective, simply stated, a name that hung heavy in the salty air. Thorne, the tech titan, the city's golden boy, dead, gone, on his yacht. Looks like a robbery gone sideways. My cynical laugh was a dry cough. Thorne, robbery? The man probably had a private army guarding his coffee machine. What could anyone want from him on his own yacht that he wouldn't just give them? The detective sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. That's what we're trying to figure out, but the brass, they want this wrapped. Fast, high profile, I know how it goes. We're working with limited resources and even more limited time. He paused, his gaze boring into mine. I need my eyes, UserRH, just a look. Unofficially, of course, for old time's sake. The way I see things, nobody else does. The offer hung in the air, a poisoned chalice. It was a siren song I'd sworn to resist, a return to the very labyrinth that had consumed me once before. The memory of the last case, the one that had shattered my career and reputation, gnawed at the edges of my resolve. My eyes cost me everything. Remember, I think I'm eager to revisit that particular hell. No, the detective conceded, his voice softer, but this is different. Thorne was important, and something about this feels off, like a meticulously arranged stage, not a crime scene. He gestured subtly towards the yacht. They're saying he was shot close range, a struggle, then a single fatal wound. Classic, but it feels too clean for a struggle. My gaze drifted back to the vessel, the crime scene techs. Luminous in their white suits, moved with a practiced grace, their careful movements a stark contrast to the violent end Thorne had met. The desire to unravel the knot, to see the unseen, was a persistent itch under my skin. Give me the official line. I relented, the words tasting like ash. Everything my people have before the story gets too polished. We moved to a less crowded section of the dock, away from the immediate glare of the lights. The detective, ever the professional, laid out the preliminary findings in a hushed tone. Thorne, found in the main cabin, shot once in the chest. No forced entry suggesting he knew his killer or was caught unawares. Valuables, including a high-end watch and a diamond-encrusted tie pin, were still on his person. A wallet, thick with cash and cards, was found on a nearby table. The only thing seemingly missing was his custom-made, encrypted satellite phone, a device Thorne was never without. No signs of a struggle, then, if the valuables are still there. I questioned, my mind already sifting through the details, searching for the cracks. That's the oddity. The detective admitted, his brow furrowing deeper. The initial report notes some disarray, a knocked-over glass, a scattered stack of papers, suggests a confrontation. But the lack of defensive wounds on Thorne's body, according to the preliminary assessment, doesn't quite fit. My internal gears began to turn, grinding against the official narrative. Disarray but no struggle, valuables present but a crucial communication device missing. It's a discordant symphony, isn't it? I walked slowly along the dock, my eyes sweeping over the scene, past the uniformed officers, past the forensics team. My perspective was different now, tainted by suspicion and loss, yet sharpened by it too. I wasn't looking for what they found. I was looking for what they missed. My gaze lingered on the yacht's mooring lines, thick ropes securing the vessel to the dock. The one closest to the stern, usually taut, had a slight slack to it, barely perceptible, and the knot, my breath caught. It was a bowline expertly tied, a seaman's knot, but there was something else. A faint, almost invisible abrasion on the rope itself, just above the point where it met the cleat. Not a fray from wear, but a specific, localized scuff, as if something had been dragged across it or pressed against it with considerable force. It was too low to be from the yacht's railing, too high to be from the dock. It was in an awkward, in-between place, and then I saw it. A single strand of synthetic fiber, not from the rope, not from the dock, caught in the minute roughness of the abrasion. It was a deep, almost iridescent blue, shimmering faintly in the patrol car's rotating lights. A fiber unlike any I'd seen in the standard uniforms of the marina staff or the police. It was a detail so small, so utterly out of place that it screamed its presence to my honed senses. The detective, observing my sudden stillness, followed my gaze. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low, sensing the shift in my demeanor. My mind raced, connecting the dots of the disarray, the missing phone, the lack of defensive wounds, and now this anomaly. This was not a robbery gone wrong. This was a message, carefully crafted, subtly delivered. The tension, which had been a low hum, now vibrated through my very bones. The game, it seemed, was afoot again. And I, UserRH, was reluctantly, irrevocably in. The cold breath of the sea still clung to me, a damp shroud in the yacht marina after dark. My gaze lingered on the cleat, a silent witness to a brutal departure. The bowline, a sailor's careful craft, mocked the violence it had facilitated. But it was the scuff, a whisper of damage just above the knot's embrace, that truly held my mind captive. It spoke of resistance, of a body perhaps dragged, or a desperate hand clawing for purchase against the unyielding rope. Not a clean, swift end, but one born of struggle. The incongruity stung. A man of the future, entangled in a death as old as the sea itself. My own past, a tapestry of frayed threads and lost causes, seemed to hum in the quiet air, a ghost observing another's fall. The old contact's voice, a gravelly echo from a life I'd tried to bury, had been a siren song I couldn't quite ignore. He'd painted a picture of a city gripped by fear, a power vacuum threatening to swallow everything. And me, UserRH, the disgraced, the cynical, drawn back into the muck by a string of circumstance and a gnawing curiosity that refused to die. I left the marina, the metallic tang of salt and diesel fading as I drove. A bowline, a scuff, these were not random details. My first foray into Thorne's digital kingdom, Nexus Dynamics, began not with a grand entrance but with a quiet infiltration of its periphery. I found a former mid-level executive, now languishing in a forgotten corner office of a rival firm, nursing a bitter grudge and a fondness for rye. His name doesn't matter, only the venom in his words. Thorne, he'd slurred, eyes clouded. He was playing God. UserRH, always pushing, always demanding. Project Chimera, that's what they called it, kept it under wraps, tighter than a drum. The name itself was a viper's hiss. It conjured images of genetic manipulation, of tampering with the very essence of life. This was far beyond the scope of mere app development or cloud computing. This was something dangerous, something that would draw the kind of enemies who didn't just want to win, but to obliterate. He leaned in, breath sour. IP theft, corporate espionage, but deeper UserRH, they were saying. Thorne was experimenting with something that could rewrite the rules, something that threatened. Established orders. His eyes, for a fleeting moment, cleared, reflecting a genuine fear before the rye reclaimed him. He made powerful enemies, UserRH, enemies who don't leave loose ends. The encounter was a brittle success. A name, a project, a hint of something vast and menacing. The next few days became a blur of digital sleuthing and discreet inquiries. I chased encrypted data trails, piecing together fragments of information from deep web forums and discarded corporate memos. I found a technical schematic, heavily redacted, buried deep in a publicly accessible patent filing that had been deliberately obscured. It detailed a complex biodigital interface, not for medical use, but for modification, enhancement. This wasn't just corporate rivalry. It was a race for power on a fundamental level. One evening, as I was sifting through a particularly dense block of code, a flicker caught my eye. Not on the screen, but outside my office window. My building, an old brick edifice tucked between a defunct print shop and a noisy bar, rarely attracted such focused attention. My hand instinctively went to the drawer where I kept my service weapon, a relic from a life I no longer claimed. I moved to the window, peering through the grimy pane. Nothing. Just the rhythmic pulsing of a neon sign across the street, painting the wet pavement in strokes of garish pink and blue. A subtle scent, however, pricked the air. Faint, almost imperceptible, like ozone after a storm, mixed with something metallic. It wasn't the city's usual cocktail of exhaust and damp concrete. It was clean, artificial, like the inside of a server room or a high-tech lab. Then a soft click, not from my office but from the building's main entrance, 2 floors below. A sound too precise for a building this old, a lock being manipulated with practiced ease. My heart, a drum I'd long thought broken, began a slow, heavy beat. I moved silently, my movements honed by years of walking the line between predator and prey. I grabbed the revolver, its weight a familiar anchor. The click came again, closer this time, from the floor below mine. They weren't coming for me. Not yet, they were looking for something or someone. I crept to my office door, pressing an ear to the cool wood. Footsteps, light and quick, ascended the stairs. 2 sets, professional. They bypassed my floor, continuing upwards towards the vacant storage rooms on the top floor. Thorne's company, Nexus Dynamics, had once used those rooms for overflow archival. I moved, a phantom in the gloom. The storage room door was ajar, a sliver of light escaping into the dark hallway. Through the gap, I saw 2 figures, silhouetted against the dim glow of a handheld device. No logos, no identifying marks, just efficient, faceless intent. One of them was kneeling, examining a stack of old server racks, long abandoned. The other stood guard, scanning the room with an unnerving stillness. My eyes, accustomed to the dim light, caught a detail on the kneeling figure's wrist. A small, almost imperceptible tattoo. A stylized serpent coiled around a stylized key. An emblem, perhaps, a symbol. They were looking for something specific, something hidden among the detritus of Thorne's past. My presence here, digging into Project Chimera, had not gone unnoticed. The encounter, brief and unseen by them, confirmed it. Thorne had indeed made powerful enemies, and now those enemies knew I was sniffing around. I had stirred the nest, and the venomous things within were beginning to writhe. The digital world, a tapestry woven from whispers and echoes, became my hunting ground. Days blurred into nights, the glow of the screen a cold sun on my face. The name, a brittle key from my last encounter, unlocked doors to a forgotten project, Nexus. It was a phantom limb of the deceased tech CEO's empire, an initiative quietly shelved, yet its ghost lingered in the margins of financial audits and obscure patent filings. My quarry emerged from the data haze. A former executive, a man dismissed from the CEO's inner circle just months before the murder. His public profile was pristine, a veneer of respectable ambition. But the digital breadcrumbs I uncovered told a different story. A sudden, inexplicable influx of funds into offshore accounts, an anonymous purchase of a secure burner phone, and a series of coded communications with an untraceable network. The trail, though faint, led to him, a man I now saw as the disgruntled architect of the CEO's demise. The motive, I reasoned, was a bitter cocktail of revenge and greed, fueled by the Nexus project's perceived failure or perhaps its stolen potential. The evidence, though circumstantial, formed a compelling narrative. I had no smoking gun, no eyewitness account, but a constellation of financial anomalies and digital footprints that converged on one man. He became the executive, my primary suspect, and the weight of his calculated malevolence pressed down on me. I felt the familiar thrill of the chase, a current running through my veins, but also a prickle of unease. It felt almost too clean, too perfectly aligned with a disgruntled employee narrative. Yet the data was undeniable. The air hung heavy with the tang of salt and diesel, the rhythmic slap of water against fiberglass hulls a melancholic drum. Masts, skeletal fingers against the bruised sky, swayed in silent judgment. Dim cabin lights cast fractured reflections onto the restless surface, each glint a fleeting eye. He was alone. My pulse quickened, a drumbeat in my ears. This was it. I emerged from the gloom, my footsteps muffled by the creak of the wooden planks. A pleasant evening for a clandestine meeting, wouldn't I agree? I offered, my voice a low rasp that carried over the lapping water. He stiffened, turning slowly. His face, etched with a practiced calm, betrayed a flicker of surprise, then resignation. UserRH, I expected I sooner or later. His voice was smooth, too smooth. Did I now? The offshore accounts, the burner phone, the coded messages. I watched his eyes, searching for a crack in his composure, a tremor of fear. He listened, impassive, his gaze fixed on the distant city lights. When I finished, a long silence stretched between us, punctuated only by the groaning of ropes and the mournful cry of a distant foghorn. "You're very thorough," he finally conceded, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "The Nexus was my baby, you know. He stole it, then discarded me, left me with nothing." His voice hardened, a brittle edge beneath the polished surface. He deserved what he got, I made sure of it. A confession just like that. The words hung in the cold air, heavy and final. A strange relief washed over me, a brief, intoxicating surge of triumph. The case, the high-profile murder, seemingly resolved. The city could breathe again. I had done it. But then a subtle dissonance. How did you manage the access? The security around him was legendary. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Even legends have vulnerabilities, especially when certain. Doors are open for you, resources I wouldn't normally possess. The false victory crumbled around me like dry earth. Help, resources. This wasn't the bitter revenge of a discarded executive. This was a setup, a convenient fall guy. He was a pawn offered up to satisfy the hounds, his confession a carefully rehearsed script. The CEO's murder wasn't a personal vendetta. It was a surgical strike, orchestrated by unseen hands. My mind raced, connecting his words to the Ether Nexus project, its potential implications, and the powerful figures who might have seen it as a threat. Political figures. This felt like the past, a phantom limb aching with old wounds. The faces of the betrayed, the innocent caught in the crossfire, flickered behind my eyes. My hands clenched, the old tremor threatening to return. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about not letting history repeat itself, not letting the true culprits vanish into the ether, leaving another pawn to bear the burden of their sins. The yacht marina after dark was a symphony of hushed anxieties. Cold air, thick with the tang of salt and diesel, scoured my skin. The rhythmic slap of water against polished hulls offered no solace, only a monotonous reminder of the relentless current that had swept me here. The false victory of the discarded executive's confession felt like a cruel joke, a shimmering mirage in the desert of my investigation. He was a sacrificial lamb offered to lull the hounds, his words a carefully crafted distraction. My triumph had evaporated, leaving behind a bitter residue of suspicion. I leaned against a cold pilaster, the steel groaning faintly with the tide's pull. The few scraps I'd managed to glean about Thorne's Project Chimera were a tangled knot of corporate jargon and encrypted fragments. A server address half obscured, a project code, Chimera 7, a series of financial transactions that vanished into shell corporations like smoke. It was a digital ghost, designed to be untraceable, yet something about its elusive nature pricked at a long-dormant wound. Hours later, hunched over my battered laptop in the cramped solitude of my office, a pattern began to emerge. I chased the faint echoes of Chimera 7 through layers of public records and thinly veiled corporate filings. Most paths led to dead ends, digital cul-de-sacs, but one particular subsidiary caught my eye. Veridian Data Solutions. The name itself was innocuous, blandly corporate, but the way it handled data, its unique encryption handshake, the specific, almost elegant method of anonymizing user profiles, it snagged something in the recesses of my memory. A sudden, sharp inhalation. My fingers froze above the keyboard. I remembered, not a company, not a specific project, but the signature. A ghost in the machine, a peculiar, almost artistic flourish in the way data was manipulated, obscured, and then weaponized. It was a fingerprint I'd only seen once before in the crucible of my professional undoing. The case that had gutted my career, flayed my reputation, and left me a pariah. The one where evidence had vanished, witnesses recanted, and a powerful cartel had walked free, leaving me holding the bag of public scorn. A glacial grip tightened around my spine. This wasn't merely corporate espionage. This wasn't just about a dead CEO. Project Chimera wasn't just a project. It was a continuation, a refinement of the very mechanism that had destroyed me. The stakes, once abstract, now pressed against my throat with an icy urgency. The late hour had bled into the pre-dawn quiet when I finally slumped into my armchair, the laptop screen still casting its pale glow across my face. Exhaustion was a heavy cloak, but sleep felt impossible, a betrayal. I closed my eyes, the unique digital signature burning behind my lids. A faint click from the hallway jolted me upright. My eyes snapped open, scanning the familiar contours of my small office. Nothing seemed amiss. The stacked files were still haphazard, the coffee mug still sat on the coaster, the window was latched. The small, tarnished silver compass, a relic from my grandfather, usually sat nestled amongst a pile of receipts on my desk. Now it rested squarely, almost deliberately, on the keyboard, its needle pointing north with an unnerving precision. It hadn't been there when I sat down. My breath hitched. No forced entry, no alarms triggered, no obvious theft. Just a message, silent and precise. I know where you are, I know what you're doing. They weren't just playing games, they were issuing a direct challenge. My phone buzzed. A message from my old contact. The official line is closing. Walk away, UserRH, for my own good. The words, meant as a warning, felt like a declaration of war. My own good. My good was buried under years of lies, and Project Chimera was exhuming it. I severed the digital connection, deleting the contact, the last thread to the official world. I was fully rogue now, a lone wolf in a digital wilderness. I needed eyes where I had none, hands that could sift through the digital chaff I couldn't even perceive. A recluse, a legend, a data architect capable of mapping the most labyrinthine digital networks. Tracking him down was a task unto itself, a series of coded messages sent to dead drops, a digital breadcrumb trail leading to an abandoned factory on the city's industrial fringe. The cartographer was a silhouette against a bank of flickering monitors, a hunched figure enveloped by the hum of servers. He was younger than I'd imagined, his face pale, eyes sharp behind thick spectacles. He regarded me with a wary suspicion, his voice a low rasp. UserRH, the one they broke. I'm the one they tried to break, I corrected, my voice steady despite the tension that coiled in my gut. The cartographer listened, his gaze never leaving the screens, his fingers dancing across a keyboard, sifting, analyzing. This signature, he murmured, a ripple of something akin to awe in his voice. It's elegant, horrifyingly efficient, not just data harvesting. It's a predictive algorithm, a behavioral modification engine. They're not just collecting information, UserRH. They're shaping reality. Manipulating public discourse, influencing markets, swaying elections, all through a network of subliminal triggers and carefully curated information streams. He brought up a complex topological map on a colossal screen, a glittering web of nodes and connections. This isn't just corporate espionage. This is an information weapon vast beyond anything I've encountered. Project Chimera is a hydra. I cut off one head, two more appear. The specific method I saw in my past case, that was an early prototype, a crude sketch. What they have now, it's a living, breathing entity, constantly evolving, learning. The past case, the one that had shattered my life, wasn't an isolated incident. It was merely an early symptom, a test run for a system designed to rewrite the fabric of society itself. The silver compass on my desk, pointing north, now felt less like a warning and more like a dire prophecy. The screen glowed, a cold sentinel in the dim room, its kaleidoscope of code refusing to yield its final secrets. Beside me, the analyst's fingers danced across the keyboard, a relentless ballet of key presses and muttered curses. The cartographer's chilling revelation still echoed in my mind, a phantom whisper of a world far more intricate and sinister than I had ever imagined. My past, shattered and discarded, was not an isolated ruin, but a foundational brick in this looming edifice of control. A system, he'd called it, designed to weave its tendrils into the very fabric of global power. And now, Thorne's encrypted legacy held the blueprint. A bead of sweat tracked a path down the analyst's temple, catching the monitor's blue light. Almost, they breathed, their voice a strained wire. Every flicker of the screen, every whir of the machine felt like a pulse in a dying heart. I watched, my jaw tight, the determination in me a bitter, metallic taste. There was no turning back. The path ahead was a razor's edge, but the precipice behind was a bottomless chasm of complicity. Then, a sudden, triumphant chime. The complex algorithms, like ancient seals, shattered. Lines of text, previously an impenetrable fortress of symbols, unfurled into coherent, damning prose. Names, faces. The architects of Project Chimera weren't a scattered few. They were a cabal, a constellation of power brokers whose reach extended into every major institution, every global market. It wasn't about money. It was about absolute dominion, a resculpting of the world order with them at its apex. This was the reveal/discovery. My own ruined career, the murder of the CEO, all footnotes in a much grander, more terrifying manuscript. A tremor ran through me, not of fear, but of profound, righteous fury. They had played us for fools, used human lives as pawns in their insidious game. My hands clenched, gripped tight. The evidence was irrefutable, a tidal wave of truth poised to crash upon their meticulously constructed world. But the moment of triumph was fleeting, eclipsed by a sudden, stark realization. If we had this, then they knew we had it. The air in the room seemed to thicken, heavy with an unseen presence. We were no longer hunting, we were hunted, before they traced the signal. The analyst nodded, already gathering their sparse equipment. Where do we go? The official channels are compromised. UserRH, I know that. I knew. My mind raced, sifting through the wreckage of my past, searching for a lifeline, however precarious. There was only one option, a perilous gambit, an old debt. A dangerous alliance forged in the crucible of a forgotten war with a ghost who moved through the city's undercurrents, loyal only to the highest bidder or the most compelling cause. This would be the event. There's an old contact, I began, the name a bitter taste on my tongue. They deal in information, in leverage. They can get this out, make it undeniable, but they are not. Clean. The analyst met my gaze, their eyes reflecting a weary understanding. Clean isn't an option anymore, UserRH, survival is. We moved quickly, a phantom pair slipping through the city's veins. My old sedan, a relic of a different life, became our temporary sanctuary, its engine a low, anxious growl, a place of hushed luxury and hidden dealings, where the masts of forgotten dreams swayed gently against a sky bruised with urban light pollution. The air was thick with the scent of salt, diesel, and money. Expensive vessels, their polished hulls gleaming like obsidian teeth, bobbed in their slips, silent witnesses to clandestine exchanges. I left the analyst in the car, the encrypted drive secured in a Faraday pouch. This was my negotiation, my risk alone. The contact preferred a singular dance. Walking the pier, my footsteps echoing faintly on the damp wood, I felt exposed, a solitary figure under the vast, indifferent expanse of the night sky. The rhythmic clinking of halyards against masts was the only sound, a metallic heartbeat. I scanned the decks of the larger yachts, my senses heightened, every nerve ending a taut wire. The contact, a silhouette against the city lights, was as I remembered, an enigma wrapped in bespoke tailoring, their face perpetually obscured by the brim of a wide-brimmed hat. UserRH, the voice was a low rasp like gravel dragged over silk, no warmth, no accusation, just recognition. I have something, I stated, cutting to the chase. Something that will shake their world, and I need it disseminated universally, irrevocably. A pause, heavy with unspoken calculations. The contact's gaze, though hidden, felt like a physical pressure. And what do I offer in return for such a disruption? My life, I replied without hesitation. And the knowledge that I will have brought down giants. The waves slapped softly against the pilings, a gentle, rhythmic sound that belied the tension between us. Show me, the contact finally said, a hint of predatory interest in their tone. I pulled out the Faraday pouch, a small, unassuming package holding the fate of a conspiracy. The contact took it, their gloved fingers surprisingly deft, almost reverent. They produced a small, high-tech device plugging the drive in. A moment of intense scrutiny, then a low whistle. "This is ambitious," they murmured, a hint of admiration. "It will be done. But know this, UserRH, once this is released, there will be no corner of this earth safe for you. Now go." I stood there for a moment, the salty air biting at my skin, the enormity of what I had just done washing over me. I had secured the evidence, yes, but at the cost of my future, my safety, perhaps even my life. The hunt had just begun and I was the prey. The wind picked up, whipping through the rigging, a mournful song of impending storm. The salt-laced wind, a cold, unfeeling whisper, raked across my face at the yacht marina after dark. The encrypted drive, a small, unassuming block of shadowed plastic in my palm, felt heavier than granite. Its secrets, a digital albatross, now determined my course, a path carved not by choice but by the relentless current of circumstance. I stood on the precipice, the city lights shimmering like fallen stars across the choppy water, each flicker a distant, indifferent eye. The enormity of what I had just done, the precarious tightrope I now walked, gnawed at the edges of my resolve. My future, already a fractured mosaic, threatened to shatter completely. My safety, a fragile illusion, had long since evaporated. There was only one way forward. The data had to be unleashed, the truth, however ugly, broadcast to pierce the veil of lies. My old contact, the one who had reluctantly pulled me back into this maelstrom, had given me a contingency, a back-channel access point. Not a secure vault or a corporate server farm, but something far more audacious in its simplicity. An abandoned factory, a skeletal husk of industry, situated on the forgotten edge of the city's docks. Its decaying infrastructure, ironically, offered the perfect cover, a blind spot in the watchful eyes of the powerful. Rust wept down its corrugated sides, staining the concrete below in ochre tears. The air grew heavy with the scent of decay and damp earth, a fitting aroma for the graveyard of secrets I was about to disturb. Gaining entry was a familiar dance of lock-picking and silent maneuvering. A rusted grate, a flimsy padlock, a creaking service door the neglect of years was my ally. Inside, the cavernous space swallowed the faint glow of my flashlight. Dust motes danced in the beam, ephemeral spirits of industry long past. The silence was profound, broken only by the drip of water and the scuttling of unseen things. Finally, nestled in a forgotten corner, behind a stack of rotting crates, I found it, a crude setup. A battered terminal, surprisingly powered, hummed faintly, its screen a dull green beacon in the gloom. It was a lifeline, jury-rigged and desperate, but functional. My fingers, trembling slightly despite my best efforts, connected the encrypted drive to the terminal. The screen flickered, lines of code blooming across its surface like alien hieroglyphs. The upload began. A percentage counter, excruciatingly slow, crawled across the display. That's when the air shifted. A subtle change in the factory's acoustics. The absence of the natural creaks and groans alerted me. 3 figures emerged from the deeper gloom, silhouetted against a distant sliver of moonlight filtering through a broken skylight. The speaker stepped forward, revealing a face I knew, a face that had haunted my waking hours and plagued my nightmares since my career imploded. It was the former security chief of the corporation, a man whose testimony had been pivotal in my downfall, the one who had spun the narrative of my incompetence and corruption, always digging, always interfering. Behind him, 2 hulking figures, the enforcers, moved with silent menace, their hands already moving to their belts. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a pursuit, it was a trap, meticulously laid. My old contact, the one who had guided me here, must have been compromised, or worse, had been playing me all along. The bitter taste of betrayal coated my tongue, a raw wound in my already fractured trust. "You led me right to you," I retorted, my voice steady despite the tremor in my gut, "and to the truth. The truth is a malleable thing, UserRH," he sneered, taking another step closer. "Especially when shaped by the right hands, and yours, my dear disgraced detective, are no longer those hands." A quick glance at the terminal, 35% uploaded, not enough, not nearly enough. "This data," I began, trying to buy time, "it exposes everything. The CEO's murder, the corporate espionage, the political payoffs, and to you." The security chief's smile tightened, losing its amusement. "A dangerous accusation, one that will die with you in this forgotten place." He gestured to his enforcers. "Finish it, make it look like an accident, a desperate, cornered rat." The first enforcer lunged, a blur of motion. I ducked, the heavy fist whistling past my ear. The air displaced by its force, a stark reminder of the brutality I faced. I retaliated, a desperate, clumsy strike to his knee, earning a grunt of pain but little else. The second enforcer moved to flank me. I was caught between them, the terminal, my only hope, behind me. This was the event. My back against the cold metal of a forgotten console, the glow of the screen, a silent witness. I fought. Every punch, every block, every desperate parry was a gamble against the clock. The upload percentage ticked upward, a slow, agonizing crawl. 45, 50. Amidst the chaos of grunts and heavy breathing, the security chief's voice cut through the din, sharper now, laced with a venom I recognized from my past. "You always were a loose end, UserRH. A stain on the pristine fabric we painstakingly wove. You asked about the truth. Here it is. I was the one who fed them the evidence that destroyed your career. You were getting too close to their operations even back then. The CEO was just another inconvenient obstacle, much like yourself." The reveal. The words struck me with the force of a physical blow, sharper than any fist. It wasn't just my career, it was orchestrated, a deliberate act of sabotage by this asterisk man, this architect of lies. My vision narrowed, the world shrinking to the faces of my attackers and the agonizingly slow progress of the upload. My past and present converged in this decaying factory, a nexus of old wounds and fresh betrayals. The personal cost was not just future safety, but the shattering of the last vestiges of my belief in a just world. I roared, a primal sound torn from the depths of my being, fueled by a decade of suppressed fury. My movements became sharper, more precise, each strike carrying the weight of past injustices. I used the environment, tripping one enforcer over a loose pipe, smashing a rusted crate into the other. The terminal screen, a beacon of hope, reads 78%. The security chief watched, his composure finally cracking. I saw the flash, felt a searing pain rip through my shoulder, a hot, wet bloom spreading across my jacket. I stumbled, but my eyes were fixed on the screen. 85%. My fingers, slick with my own blood, fumbled for the enter key. The sound, distant at first, grew louder, closer. He cursed, his carefully constructed edifice of control crumbling. His enforcers exchanged nervous glances. I sagged against the console, my shoulder burning, the world beginning to tilt. I had won, yes, the truth was free. The sirens wailed, a mournful chorus for a victory earned at a terrible price. The metallic shriek of the siren, once a distant promise, now screamed its victory from beyond the factory's fractured gates. I watched, a phantom weight still clinging to my shoulder where the rifle had rested, as the security chief's face, a mask of calculated ice, finally fractured into something akin to terror. His curses were swallowed by the cacophony of approaching authority, the flashing strobes painting the grimy walls in an urgent, pulsing red. The edifice crumbled indeed. The hours that followed blurred into a tapestry of harsh lights and clipped questions. Uniformed figures swarmed, their presence a stark contrast to the clandestine shadows I had navigated. I felt a strange detachment, as if watching a play unfold, the final act of a gruesome drama. The exhaustion was a leaden cloak, heavy and suffocating, but beneath it, a tiny ember of triumph flickered, weak but persistent. My name, whispered in the cold air, no longer carried the full weight of its disgrace, only the echo of a hard-won battle. Weeks later, the city air still tasted of damp concrete and unseen exhaust, but the acrid tang of gunpowder had finally faded from my clothes. A single lamp cast a weak, amber glow on the polished deck of a modest cruiser, illuminating the figure waiting for me. It was the senior investigator, their face etched with the weariness of a war fought in boardrooms and back alleys, not on battlefields. UserRH, they greeted, their voice a low rumble against the gentle lapping of the waves. A long time coming. I nodded, stepping onto the gangplank, the wood groaning softly under my weight. The detective gestured to a small enclosed seating area, a glass table between two cushioned benches. We have the full picture now, my intel, my actions. They cracked it wide open. The words, though expected, still resonated with a quiet power. This was it. The reveal. The CEO's murder, the senior investigator began, a folder open on the table, was a warning, a message to anyone who dared question their control. The hidden network, as I called them, was far more extensive than we initially imagined. A consortium of old money and new tech, pulling strings in every sector. Corporate espionage, yes, but also political leverage, judicial influence. They'd been operating for decades, building a silent empire, ensuring their chosen candidates won, their rivals failed, their deals went unchallenged. My gaze drifted to the dark waters beyond, seeing not the reflections of the city lights, but the ghostly faces of those caught in the network's silent machinations. The CEO, a pawn, the security chief, a brutal enforcer. They were preparing to activate a new phase, a global expansion. Had you not intervened when you did, the damage would have been irreversible. The senior investigator paused, their eyes meeting mine, a flicker of something akin to respect in their depths. The arrests have been quiet, strategic. Several high-profile figures, including a prominent senator and 2 corporate executives, are already in custody. Others are being watched, their assets frozen. The victory felt weighty, not light. My name, once dragged through the mud, was being carefully, quietly laundered. The scorn might lessen. But the scars, oh, the scars were etched deep. The years I'd lost, the trust I'd forfeited, the solitary path I'd walked. They were not easily erased by a single triumphant act. And my past? I inquired, the words thin on the salty air. The senior investigator sighed, a sound of profound weariness. The old case, it's being reviewed. New evidence has come to light, implicating others, clearing my direct involvement in the worst of it. It won't be a full exoneration, not yet. Too many powerful people were invested in my fall. But the official record will reflect a different truth. A partial clearing. The thought was a foreign country, beautiful and terrifying. My journey had led me through a desolate landscape of lies and betrayals, forced me to confront the very secrets I'd fought to keep buried. I had risked everything, my meager existence, my fragile peace. The UserRH who had started this twisted hunt was gone, replaced by someone sharper, more cynical yet paradoxically more aware of the fragile threads that held society together. The night wind picked up, rustling the rigging of the nearby yachts, a mournful symphony. I looked out at the vast, indifferent ocean, stretching into an unseen horizon. The fight was won, this battle at least. But the echoes of power, the insidious tendrils of corruption, they were like the deep currents beneath the calm surface, always there, always pulling. The world wasn't suddenly pristine. It was merely exposed. My future, a canvas of shifting grays, lay undefined before me. There was a quiet resolve in my heart, a knowing that while this particular chapter had closed, the larger narrative of justice, of righting wrongs, was a story without end. The fight was never truly over, and perhaps, I realized, a flicker of something new igniting within me, I was finally ready for that.